Welcome to the Emerald Doorway. If you're listening on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give us 5 stars and subscribe. Welcome to the Emerald Doorway. Once you've gone in, there's no turning back. There's only one way to move, and that's forward. What can be said of tonight's guest, Sean Woodward? He's an artist, writer, poet, occultist, and musician. He writes and illustrates comic books and graphic novels, and has designed multiple tarot decks. He travels the world from the pyramids of Egypt to the remote temples of India and Thailand. He also goes beyond this world and beyond this universe. He has over 30 years of occult study and practice under his belt. He is the British Grandmaster of Ordo, Templi, Orientis, Antigua, and La Couleuvre Noire, better known to many as the Cult of the Black Snake. He was consecrated a Gnostic bishop by the legendary Michael Bertriaux. He is nonetheless completely self-taught. His art, music, and writings reflect this, as though he constantly reinvents the wheel. Sean's various mediums bleed into one another. A song will pick up where a graphic novel left off. A short story or a poem will carry the concept even further. In Sean's extremely creative Gnostic Voudonic vision, science fiction and occult ritual often blend together. His graphic novels take you beyond the confines of space-time, weaving in and out of this planet towards galaxies and dimensions very distant from here. Thoth and Merlin reminisce about their days in ancient Atlantis. A group of skeletal necromancers haunt an abandoned weystation on a faraway planet called Leng, where Zhao, the great scientist sorcerer, waits in cosmic imprisonment. Woodward's mythos take us to faraway galaxies, deserted islands, lands of pyramids, and sunken cities of underwater forests. The archons, also known as the Virr, play the role of the ill-intentioned cosmic antagonists, and a secret earthbound cabal attempts to thwart their dark efforts. Entering Sean Woodward's creative universe is to enter a world of spider gods, Voudon spirits, clophotic tunnels, lycanthropes, voltigeurs, vampires, dark wizards, serpent goddesses, and golem. I caught Woodward the following day after he gave an Edgeways lecture on Lemurian magic, a concept he plans to publish as a future novel, a kind of sister book to his already released Atlantean magic. Okay, we are very excited today. We have our guest, Sean Woodward, who is all the way from England. What part of England do you live in currently?
It's the middle of the country, the Midlands.
Okay, the Midlands. All right,
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, we're gonna discuss a bunch of interesting things today. I believe it was last night that you just did your Edgeways lecture on Lemurian witchcraft. Is that right?
It is, yes. Yes, that went quite well.
How'd it go? Can you give us a little, I don't know, like a little like snippet or paraphrase of some key
Sure.
topics you discussed?
Yeah, well, what I did, I wrote a essay for the Zars and Sounds magazine on the same subject. And so I tried to sort of distill from that 7 or 8 key aspects, talking about how Lemuria is often overlooked for Atlantis, but yet the peoples and the technologies were very much the same, and then ways in which there are echoes of that in the Pacific. I've traveled a lot around the Pacific, here in Asia, um, and sort of west coast of America, etc., and South America. So I was able to sort of pull in experiences I've had over the years. And there's been a lot of similar ones. For example, in Bali at Tanah Lot, which is a Hindu Buddhist temple on the beach there. It was made famous in the 70s because Pirelli did a calendar shoot there with models and upset everybody. So it's quite well known for that, and quite a good place to see the sunset. But when I was there, the first time I was there, I was sort of ushered to one side and away up some steps through the rock by the local priests, who sort of took me in with gestures and hand signals and things, and bestowed some empowerments. And that's been a common theme. I mean, I was in Japan one time, near Tokyo Tower, um, and there was a shrine, a kami shrine procession taking place where they have these huge wooden poles that shoulder that about 20 people shoulder the shrine on, and they moved the shrine from its home to various places, and it was going to visit another site. And again, I got dragged into that. The next thing I knew, I was wearing their jacket. I was under one of these poles, heavy on your shoulder, as they rocked the shrine through the streets of Tokyo. And apparently, it's a good blessing for strangers to appear at such gatherings.
Wow.
Uh, and this has happened many times. I mean, in India, in this place called the Amber Fort in Rajasthan. And it's a big scale. The gateways and stuff are designed so you can ride elephants through them. Um, but inside there's some small Hindu temples. Uh, and again, I was taken to one side there by a priest of the Kali sect. And this is a sect that is reserved only for the warrior caste. So if you're Indian, you can only go inside these temples if you're born into the warrior caste. But again, he seemed to recognize something, and it was just indicative of many of these experiences I've had around the Pacific and around the area that was influenced by Lemuria.
Have you spent much time in Hawaii?
Yes, yeah. I mean, there was a experience I talked about uh, with Edgeways, and I can't remember the pronunciation now, but there's a site in the middle of Oahu, the a sort of ancestral birthing stones for the royal families.
Oh, wow.
Um, and it's a very eerie spot. It's sort of in the middle of nowhere. There's one road that runs flat for miles, and you're just surrounded by the jagged mountainous terrain from the volcano landscape. Um, and yeah, there was some very odd occurrences there, uh, and also uh, again, I forget now the name of the islands, but there's some Pacific islands where they have these slit drums, which are sort of vertical drums with slits carved in them that produce this really deep sonorous sound. And actually, there's a couple of them in the Bishop Museum in Oahu. Uh, so this is, and they were believed to hold the sort of souls of ancestors, and good and bad spirits as well. And so there's all these sort of remnants scattered around.
So it's almost like you're saying that at times when you've visited the Pacific, you feel like remnants or traces of what's left from the Lemurian current, sort of.
Yes, very much so.
That's interesting. Have you experienced that also with Atlantis? Like maybe traveling, like have you been to Egypt or areas like maybe like near Greece, like areas more associated with Atlantis?
Yeah, I mean, I've been to Egypt a number of times. Um, Most recently, I paid a trip to the actual site of the inception of the Book of the Law in Cairo, which was interesting. The apartment building Crowley rented at the time is long gone. There's a modern replacement there, but there's still something quite strange in the air around that area. Um, and yeah, I've been to Athens a number of times as well, and I think with a lot of the European remnants, um, they do feel very much sort of set in the sort of Greek and Roman periods. You don't get that sort of alien feel to them that you do
Mhm.
in the Pacific, I find.
Interesting. There's so many interesting theories associated with Atlantis. I know that during like Elizabethan times that many Europeans believe that that the Americas were Atlantis, and I've also heard it proposed that Antarctica is actually Atlantis. So there's I don't know. There's different ideas floating around, but that's interesting about I mean about being in the Pacific and feeling like the haunted remains of some kind of Lemurian current. I like that.
Yeah, it's sort of very much a sort of H.P. Lovecraft, Clark Ashton Smith feel to it as well. I mean, one of the other interesting things about Atlantis is, Plato describes it as being west of the Pillars of Hercules, which is often taken to be Gibraltar
Hmm.
and to the Mediterranean. But in a lot of European myth, there is this island in the west. I mean, in the Celtic myth, with the likes of the Tír and Og and the Fomerians, there's an isle. There's the Isle of Brazil, which is was reputed to be sort of westwards, and even something like Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Again, he was influenced by this because the place the elves go to is west of Middle Earth.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a crossover there. Um, that is interesting stuff. So, I wanted to, well, but before we go on and talk about some other stuff, I just wanted to talk about some other projects that you have going on right now that are interesting. I know that you're working on the illustrated grimoire of Zal. Is that right?
It is, yes. And I've just finished the 82nd page of that.
Nice.
So I'm hoping to get that finished shortly. Uh, it was a little tricky because, on the one hand, it's an interpretation of the Grimoire of Zal book. But as I started working on it, it became a little bit different in that it's more from the perspective of a practitioner. Um, so that there was key things that students that undertook some of the rituals in the book experienced that I've woven into it. So it begins with this sleeper who is sort of haunted and attacked by the Shuggoth, these spherical eyes, um, and the sense of drowning, of waters rising up around them. So it begins there, but it does follow the framework of the book. So it then goes to New Orleans, and there's various things experienced and happens there, and slowly it makes its way to Tibet, and the sort of conclusion of the rite.
Yeah, I was gonna say that one thing that I've noticed on your page that's interesting that you've talked about and that I wanted to ask you about was the Tibetan furba that you got. You said you got it in India, and you were saying that that's associated. You've written about it in the Grimoire of Zal, or it has some kind of an association, right?
Yeah, well, it was part of the behind the scenes series I've been posting on social media. So with that, I took some photographs of that perma I own and included it into the artwork. So there's a picture on one of the pages of this Tibetan priest holding up like a dagger, and that's in his hand. So it was really just to give a glimpse into some of the making of.
That's interesting. You've been working on. I mean, you did the Grimoire of Zal. You're doing the illustrated Grimoire of Zal. I know that you've also written about the character Zal and in some of your other comics, the Leng comics, the Leng mythos. How long has this character existed, and where does this character come from?
Um, well, my experience of it was sort of quite soon after first reacquainting myself with the Voudon Gnostic workbook in 2012, because that opened up some visionary experiences that were sort of cosmic and interstellar. And as part of that, this figure of Zal, or Zal is an abbreviation of Zaha Lin, his actual name. And the more I experienced this, the harder it was to sort of pin down the nature of this being, because I was being flooded with all this kind of fantastical science fiction like um, chronicle of this character who, as a child, was instrumental in this cataclysmic interstellar event that caused this void, the Varran void, to be formed in space. And then when he's older, as a sort of scientist magician, um, he falls foul of this sort of infection, this attack on space that is a byproduct of this um, these entities from another dimension coming into ours, and effectively their touch just destroys space-time.
Wow.
Um, and so in the end, the peoples of the star systems that Zal inhabits, etc., have to flee and come on an armada to Earth, and sort of become the elder gods, the lower and the like, and the Atlanteans and the Lemurians. But Zel himself, along with some of his companions, because they have this technology, these things called cubes, which are kind of sentient computers, family computers. But his and some of these others got infected by the Virr, and so he was banished to the planet of Leng, the snowy wastes of Leng, and there were measures put in place, these testament pylons, which sort of surround where he lives. But basically, if they cross the perimeter, it will destroy the planet's core. So what he did was he started projecting his consciousness across the universe to Earth and inhabiting various people and animals and rocks and things. And so you've got this character that is sort of the scientist magician. Um, but then when I started looking at him from the lens of sort of, Kabbalistic gematria and the like, I started seeing all these numerical equivalences, which were pointing towards other things and to which had a sort of crossover with my own magical identity as well. So even to the point at one point where a student who'd done some other research on it sort of said, "Well, if you look at this and you look at this, it's you, isn't it?" Um,
Huh.
and which kind of took me back at the time, because I see Zal as very sort of distinct from me because I see all this history, um, but then I'm having to write about it in sort of split it up and sort of write about the magical aspects in the magical work and the sort of more fantastical science fiction stuff in the science fiction books. But in the science fiction books, you have that history sort of played out.
Yeah. Actually, that was such an eloquent like answer, and it summed up some things that I was still somewhat confused about in the Leng mythos. It was beautifully said. I remember when I was reading the Necromancer of Leng, I was somewhat confused about the passage of Earth because so much of it takes place in other worlds, in this abandoned waste station full of these skeletal necromancers.
Yes.
The passage about Earth I initially found kind of confusing. So, well, like, so what exactly is Zal's relationship with Earth? Like, he is he living there and projecting his consciousness outwards, or is Earth just another place that he visits?
Um, he seems to have a preoccupation with Earth. I mean, so yeah, he's kind of marooned on Leng, uh, trying to find ways of escaping and trying to escape to Earth, and in doing so, inhabiting people, possessing them effectively, on Earth. Um, and it's all kind of tied in as well with in the stories. There's this organization called the Cabal that are sort of occult troubleshooters, uh, and there is one of their member, who's kind of his race is sort of vampire like, and he belongs to those older races, from the areas that Zal originates from. And so there's a sort of link there. But there's definitely they come to Earth. Earth is the place they come to. The rest of the races, and so he it's Earth he's occupied with really.
Where is Earth historically during the timeline of Zal? Is that like during the present? Is that during the past, antiquity?
Um, there's a mixture actually because one of the difficulties is that when this armada of ships traveled across space to Earth, they were affected by time distillation, which meant some arrived in the past, some arrived in the future. So you've got the ones that arrived in Atlantis and Lemuria, and then you've got ones that arrived in our future who are sort of trying to cast stuff backwards to to help out. Um, and it's sort of predominantly those areas, time wise.
Interesting. So is the split of timelines, how there's the past and the future occurring at the same time, multiple the absence of time and space ultimately, and uh the ability to go to different places, which brings up so many other questions simultaneously. One of the first things that makes me think about, and it's one of my favorite subjects, is Lamb. Because when I think about and I wanted to ask you about your relationship with Lamb. I had some experiences with Lamb a few years ago that were very powerful. I felt like I had some direct transmissions with Lamb. I wrote them all out in a notebook obsessively. It kind of began the beginning phases of my own personal mythos. But with Lamb, I feel like there is always an element of time associated with that being, with that deity. And also, I feel like there seems to be sort of a division of time and space, and time broken up into the past, the present, and the future simultaneously. Have you had experiences with Lamb? What's your relationship with that deity, with that character?
I think what you're saying does echo some of my own experiences, actually. I mean, a couple of the key takeaways I had with my own Lamb work was that Lamb wasn't singular, Lamb was many,
Yeah.
which is why in Keys to the Hoodoo Kingdom, there's an illustration I did called the Mother of Lambs,
Oh.
um, as a kind of almost Mary-like figure. And also in the Grimoire Azal, there is an incantation, Lamazel,
Oh,
which
wow.
which is used. Um, and again, on the sort of similar idea that the lambs were another of these races, like the other ones that became lower, that became Egyptian gods, etc.
Perfect. And the second thing that reminded me of that I definitely wanted to talk to you about, and I think we talked about it last time we talked, but it's just something that's been on my mind constantly that I want to bring up, is the 8-point Mandalum that's written about in the Gnostic Voudon workbook. And basically the quarters and the cross quarters associated with the different spider loa and its association with time travel.
Yeah, it's it's a common theme, but it's one that a lot of people are drawn to. Um, I mean, I often think as well that there was a passage in Grant Morrison's The Invisibles where they go time traveling, and he talks about it being the practices used by the Black Snake cult in Chicago. Um, so yeah, and also the spider sorcerers, it who are very close actually in nature to the Voltigeurs that are able to leap the tree of life. Likewise, they're able to leap time and space through the different coordinates of the spider's web.
It makes me think of almost of like and I don't know if this is I'm sure somebody else has had this idea, but it almost makes me see an image a of Lamb's head with a spider body.
Yes, and in fact, I think I'm trying to remember now. I can't remember if it was on Whispers of the Hidden Path or something else I did for Edgar Curtville, but I did do an illustration very similar to that. It became an album cover as well.
That's awesome. That's cool. Yeah, no, that is some, I mean, those two chapters, there's a chapter where he talks about the Mandalum, and then there's the next chapter where he talks about different OTO sexual rights that can power the Mandalum. Is that right, more or less?
Yes, yeah. There's various ways. I mean, it's interesting because when you look at sort of traditional voodoo and hoodoo, unfortunately, a lot of the means there are through blood and death.
Hmm.
Uh, blood sacrifices.
Sacrifices of birds and things
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. Whereas with the voodoo Gnostic, those are definitely not the practices used. So there are other practices. There are sexual energies. There are thought energies. There are the energies of the ogres. the body related ones. There are ones that you can effectively steal and draw out of others. You can take the prayers of a nearby church and reassemble them uh,
Interesting.
for whatever semi-nefarious purposes you might be up to. So yeah, there are different ways of powering these magical machines. Old Vulture, turning his back on Prometheus with a craggy laugh. We never escape you. You shared our egg, waiting inside the needle's eye. The tame serpent of the umbilical cord crumbled becomes your neck. Forsaken is all hope, gagged and left under the tiptoed shadowed sun. Always running through the years, but the cycle of night draws near, the frightening appearance of the old vulture closer. Keep your weather eye clear. The black spot, the unknotted membrane of his feigned death flutters from your stomach, to stand tall and menacing, wings dipped in blood, and eyes more knowing than any earthly bird should.
The different families associated with Gede, and the Zaragwin family, of course, is particularly interesting to me. The family of time traveling tarantulas, and it's interesting that like these Loa, these entities seem uh to me to be pretty much specific to the Black Snake sort of mythos. Like when you try to find Zaragwin, say, associated with any kind of like, I know like that the Black Snake was said to have begun in Haiti, but when you try to look at them associated with Haitian or African or American voodoo Loa, you don't really hear about them. They're obscure. They seem centralized to the cult of the Black Snake. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think some of the defining differences with the cult of the Black Snake or La Couleuvre Noire is that yes, there are these orders, these families of Loa that you won't find in traditional voodoo or hoodoo, and also there are the family association, the Jimane family themselves act as almost sort of in the Tibetan sense, Dharma protectors. They stand by the side of the magicians that are initiated into the Black Snake cult lineage, um, which again is quite different. Uh, and I think that's partly because of the way in which with the hoodoo or the voodoo Gnostic hoodoo, um, you're working alongside these entities, which may be very fearsome. I mean, the Lucky Hoodoo themselves are always portrayed in a kind of, friendly neighborhood hoodoo type way. But when you start to look at the Gay Day and some of the other families, um, there are fearsome qualities to them. So it helps to have these Jean Main family protectors. Um, to aid the magician in the work. But yes, the lower families themselves are quite different, and there is this preponderance of insect-based ones that you'll find in the Voodoo Gnostic workbook as well.
Yeah. Actually, that brings me to another question too, is it's such an interesting book because it begins so simple. Like some of the practices in the beginning are almost, I mean, they're they're powerful, but they're almost too simple. And then all of a sudden, it's like after the 10 courses, you go you go into the Gede grimoire, and it's like mind-blowingly complex. And the happy, lucky spirits of the hoodoo that he talks about in the beginning, and their associations with different cardinal points, those are much different than the Gede family. That's right? They're not. It's not like you're learning about the happy, lucky hoodoo family in the beginning, and then you come to learn that they are the Gede family. Like there's a difference between them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, it echoes a difference, a kind of polarity that runs through the Voodoo Gnostic work and is sort of analogous with the way that the order itself, Ordo Templi Orientis Antigua and La Couleuvre Noire, are two separate sides of the same coin, and they are very different in nature. LCN is a lot more sorcerous, a lot more voodoo raw, whereas OTOA is more sort of it's got more of the Hermetic, the Masonic, the ecclesiastical with it. And with some of those papers in the workbook, you're seeing aspects of the LCN work, which is a lot darker. Um, and the thing is, the way the book was published and put together, you have this jumble of papers of varying levels and varying, uh, complexity. So it can be a little bit off-putting because you'll have, like you say, it starts out with the Lucky Hoodoo Grimoire, which is fairly well self-contained and succinct. And then you have this scattering of different papers from different times and different bodies. Some not complete. In some cases you'll get a few papers on a subject and then nothing more. And in other cases, it will then just turn to another area altogether, whether it's Shintotronics or the Ogres or actually some of the deep future stuff. Night comes wet to Virginia. The alchemist trees adept at stealing colour from the shiny depths of every drop. Shivering in the Halloween wind, they wrap a cloak of golden leaves around their soaking shoulders and dream of soldiers in the trap of the Rappahannock, sliding between worlds, called by the cannon wheels to the land of night, called by the riflemen to the sleep without light. I hear their voices, echoes huddled on the horizon, crouched beneath the trees, hidden now by interstate, by re-election campaign pleas, conversing with the generals of the fall. These forests of ancient strategy, standing now so proud and tall. Night comes wet to Virginia, carrying with it all these moments that linger.
When I read about, like, in the very early parts of the Gnostic Voudon workbook, he talks about the different quarters, and he talks about how the north is associated with the dew, the death spirits, and the west is associated with the who, which are like the Atlantean, well, lost Atlantean underwater reptile spirits with snake heads and frog bodies and things like that. And he mentions a deity associated with the west named Mater. But I kind of would scroll through, and try to find, like in different Haitian or African voodoo systems, a Loa with the name of Mater who is associated with underwater magic or water elemental magic. And I found that really, really hard to find. I believe Kyle Fight said that his belief was that Mater was some kind of incarnation of Grand Boy. What's your opinion on the subject?
Yeah, I think it's similar. I mean, maître is French for master, and it's master of the lands under the sea, which I always sort of, in my own mind, thought of as a kind of, almost Neptune-like figure, because as you say, you have the who and the do, and the who being these water-based magicians, um, and the master, the maître of the lands under the sea, as being the sort of almost the ruler of them. But yeah, Grambois as well, because it talks of forests and flooded forests. I think there's a relationship there too.
Yeah, yeah, he's kind of the Loa of the forest, flooded forest. It's an interesting concept. And also, okay, another question I wanted to ask you too is when you and you said that you got into the Gnostic Voudon workbook around 2012, is that right? Like when you really started to dedicate yourself to it?
Yeah, I mean, initially I saw it when the first edition came out back in 1980 or whenever it was, and it kind of stalked me for a while. I saw the first edition when it came out, but wasn't too impressed with the the typeface and the production qualities. I saw it again in Magical Child in New York, which I found out later was,
Legendary place.
yeah, which was where it had been published. It was Herman that had actually published it.
Wow.
Um, and and then after that, it kind of went out of print and you couldn't get it for love or money. So when Weiser republished it, I thought it was a good time to have a proper look. And in doing so, it kind of just unleashed everything that followed.
That's kind of where I'm at with it right now. I'm obsessed with it and I'm taking it really slow. But a question that I wanted to ask you, and this makes me think of other magical systems like Enochian magic. It seems like when there are deities that are more well established because, they're more well known, perhaps they're more ingrained in the collective consciousness or the egregore, like if there are like spirits that are more well known, like Papa Legba, do you ever feel like initially it's easier to make contact with those spirits than say like some of the more obscure spirits of the Gede family, like the Zerengwen that you're learning about for the first time? It's like learning about a deity for the very first time and trying to make contact with it when you barely know anything about it. Like, what is your experience with that? And do you have any advice on making contact with spirits that you're just learning about?
I think one of the interesting things, and this is echoed in traditional voodoo as well, is that you have this notion of the Met-Tet, the spirit of the head. And this is the voodoo lower that is closest to your own personality, and sort of will act as a gateway and a guardian. Although that can change, it's not sort of fixed, it can change. But the thing I found was, and it's something to be a little bit wary of, is that there is this kind of residual effect that takes place. For some time, I sort of believed that Papa Legba was my own Met-Tep. Um, and there would be periods when that connection was intense, and effectively he would make me lame for a while.
Lame?
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. You know, having to crawl around on all fours lame. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and it wasn't until through sort of some dream works that I discovered who my own Meta actually was that kind of healed all of that and stopped it reoccurring. So this is one of the things about the lower possessing you. They do have an effect upon you. Um, I mean, I had one experience in New Orleans. There's a voodoo museum there, a very good museum that has a lot of artifacts and historical pieces and the like. Um, and I had somebody there tell me how there was one particular object. It was actually of the other version of Legba, whose name is disappeared out of my mind at the moment, but the older name. Um, and they actually had this sensation of something clawing their way up their back,
Wow.
sitting on their shoulders, and basically trying to push their mind to one side.
Wild.
Um, and it was, I mean, it was. I went to the spot in the room in the museum where they'd experienced this, and you could feel this kind of presence that was just trying to latch onto something or somebody. So, um, yeah, the possession side of it is something you've always got to sort of bear in mind.
Interesting. I'm glad you brought up Papa Legba. I was reading through a huge portion of Keys to the Hoodoo Kingdom last night. And like, one of my favorite chapters was when Papa Legba is upon me. There's just such an interesting sort of like narrative about your relationship with that spirit. And um, I don't recall you talking about crawling on all fours, but just the different ways that he makes you feel, the different experiences that you've had with him. That was a really, really beautiful chapter.
Thank you. I'm not sure if that's the one where I talk about the possession petite, which is something else I experienced where you it's like a sort of a lesser version of possession where you start to feel yourself changing in terms of your natural likes and dislikes, your demeanor, the way you act and with other people, etc., and the things that interest you. All of a sudden, with Legba, I found it was like you were adopting somebody else's persona as well.
Interesting. And then yeah, I mean there's so many interesting concepts and sort of facets to hoodoo and Haitian hoodoo and voodoo and all of that. But so you talk about the master of the head and you've also written about the T-bone Ange.
Yes.
Is the concepts sound kind of similar, almost kind of like a like sort of a different manifestations of the guardian angel almost. So what are some similarities and differences between those two forces?
I think the closest I come to parallels with it is in Egyptian myth where you have the Ka and the Ba as
Okay.
separate parts of being. Um, with the Haitian, it's split into this trinity. You've got the gross bon ange, the good big angel, as you say, the smaller one, and the Metet, the one at the head. But also, and this was something that in discussion with Michael Bertriaux, he agreed with and sort of gave me some other pointers on it, is I'd come to the realization that the T-bon ange, the lesser angel, was actually the one that was sort of the custodian of your consciousness. That was the one that, through lifetimes, would act as a kind of arc for your consciousness, and so that, and it would also act as an agency for you, in insofar as it would trigger things and events to help you reconnect with it. Because one of the things I found was that my involvement with magic and the occult happened when I was very young. I had no conscious coming to it. Nobody showed me it. Nobody took me along to a coven, uh, or left. There was no sort of grandfather's Alistair Crowley's Book of Lies left under the bed or anything. Um, I was just drawn to initially to Crowley and Grant's work, and I was fortunate in that the material was available then. It was just when it was being published, and later on, various events happened that gave me access to other materials. There was an occult bookstore opened in my local town, which was kind of unheard of in
Yeah.
the. I mean, they had a lot of grief. It was called the Ace of Wands, and I think the very first week they opened, they had the local evangelical church members put bricks through their windows,
Oh wow.
and this became so regular they couldn't get insurance for the building in the end.
Oh no.
Um, but as a sort of 15-year-old who had already digested everything on Grant and Crowley could find in the libraries, um, suddenly I had access to everything else that was being published at the time, and that's where I first saw the Voodoo Gnostic workbook. But again, it was another example of things being drawn to you that you needed. And so I think with the T-Bon Ange, uh, it is there sort of acting independently for you and acting as a sort of an arc, a custodian of consciousness through lifetimes, so that you're able. And my feeling, and it's one of the things that caused me to write Keys to the Hoodoo Kingdom and to try and instill, is that the sooner in life somebody can reconnect with themselves, can reconnect with the current, then the easier everything else becomes. Because it's very similar to Crowley's notion of thelema and will, in that once you are identified with your will and you're doing with your will, there is nothing in the universe that can stand in the way. And so the earlier in life you're able to do that, it just makes everything so much easier.
So interesting. I feel some some parallels with you in the sense that so I mean I mean on one hand I mean I feel significantly less than because when you were 12 years old, I read when you first basically dissected and read all of Crowley's Confessions. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, well, to put it, I was 12 years old when I first picked up the Book of Thoth, the Book of the Law, and the Book of Wisdom or Folly. I understood very, very little of them. I got into them because I was into Psychic TV and Current 93. Um, I basically battled trying to understand it and really didn't break through into even slightly understanding it until I was probably about like 19, 20. But I relate to the idea of it always being there from an early age, and I also relate to that sort of idea of never having a teacher, like always kind of just having the books guide you. Um, I'm the same way. I feel like there's been multiple times where I have tried to become associated with teachers or orders, but I keep getting pulled back to just my own independent study. And I know for you it was a geographical kind of limitation. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, England is a small place really in comparison with, anywhere else, especially America. But, in those days, in the late 70s and the early 80s, um, yeah, getting to the capital, to London, was a big deal. And also because of my age at the time, um, it was difficult as well in that respect. And it's funny because I have distinct memories of being very frustrated by these things. Um, I mean, it's like I would, as time went on and I was able to get to London and stuff, I would scour secondhand bookshops and things for books by Crowley and stuff. And in those days, you could get hold of them. They were still available. Um, but none of these places really were what I had in my mind. And I kind of realized over the years gradually that actually what I had in my mind was my own library that I'd been accumulating over all these years.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, and also likewise, I didn't really have a lot of involvement with other groups or anything. Again, because of these barriers, there were small zines and things that you could get in London that would have details of the various groups and stuff. And I did write for some of the occult magazines at the time. Um, and I had, as time went by and I got a little older, I did get involved with some groups. There was a branch of the Typhonian OTO. Uh, and, one of the interesting stories was with that was that um, I had quite a close involvement with it. And then it all kind of fizzled out. And then a few years ago, the Grandmaster of that group got in touch with me and bequeathed me his magical collection, basically. Um, and when he heard that I was actually involved with the Voudon Gnostic side of things to the degree I am, he was kind of, well, I'm not surprised actually, because we had this charter with the OTOA at the time. There were these close links that I knew nothing about. Um, and so it's a small world. It's strange, even when, like I say, I spent decades, out of the limelight, busy with stuff. Um, and yet, it all comes together. And it's kind of good now that it's worked that way because with my project Tum Santorum, the occult anthology,
Yeah, and you
a
just
lot, a
released
lot
sorry.
yeah, just sorry, just done volume 5. But the thing is, I'm at a place now where I know all these people. The people that are in it, the people that there's quite a few people that back in the day were just names.
Mhm.
I personally know them now, and I'm able to get them to contribute and things. So um, I feel things have moved in a really good direction, and a lot of that has been due to the involvement with the Voodoo Gnostic.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like what you're saying about will, aligning your will and then the universe comes
Yeah,
to you.
yeah.
Um, I don't know. Yeah, I feel a little bit of that in my life lately. Like I've, um, yeah, just. just with some of the interviews and some of the conversations I've had recently, some of the people that I used to look at as like giants or people that I'm more in touch with on a more frequent basis lately. So I don't know, maybe my world's opening up a little bit too. But yeah, tell me a little bit about Tom Santorum, Volume 5. What were some of your favorite what were some of your favorite chapters? What were some of your favorite parts of editing it, and what are for people who are buying it? What can they look forward to?
So for people who don't know anything about it, as I say, it's a collection of writings, art by contemporary occultists and artists. Um, there's many names in there people will be familiar with, people like our friend Kyle Feit, Hagen von Tulian, Michael Bertriaux himself contributed to one issue. Um, Clive Harper, who for many years was very much involved with the OTO here in the UK. Um, Denny Sargent, another good
Hmm.
friend.
Oh yeah, he's great.
Uh, yes, the Wolfman is there. Um,
Did you have Curval in this
yes,
issue?
Edgar's yes is in this one, and he should be contributing to the next one. And what I've tried to do is sort of make them thematic. So this one, the theme was amulets, talismans, and sigils. And although it's not set in stone, it just sort of helps people sometimes to sort of rally around a theme. So they have themes. The plan is to do at least 11, like the equinox,
Hmm.
um, hopefully more. Um, and in a quicker time frame. This last one, I think, took over a year. It took a lot longer than it should have done, just to get everything together for it. And it was interesting because one of the contributions I was waiting for, again, from a good friend who we go back a long way, Marcus Katz, who's involved a lot with tarot. He promised me something for it, and when it after some time appeared, it was sort of like a page worth. So that was interesting, but equally, a very nice contribution to have. Uh, and I think in this one, Kyle starts one of his long fiction pieces uh,
Oh, that's awesome.
that we had some conversations about because the lead character is kind of an anagram of my name. So,
Oh, okay. That's funny. Is
so that's
is is the lead character like a likable character, or was it a
he's mixed. Yeah, he's mixed.
he's mixed? Okay. I had a very similar experience with something I wrote, and my former co-host uh Brian, I'd finished a novel that I'm working on editing and hopefully getting published at some point. And one of actually the absolute worst characters in the book had a name that almost mirrored Brian's, and Brian was helping me edit it, and he was like, "You have to change the name."
Yeah,
You never know what's going to jump out of your
you
subconscious.
don't. And the thing is, Kyle and I, we talk a lot, we work magically a lot, etc., creatively. And so we do have things that kind of intertwine. There are things that crop up in his books and crop up in mine that sort of mesh together and weave in and out. So it's a good thing.
Yeah. How long have you known Kyle?
Um, quite some time, quite some time. We first met when in the early days of Lashtel.com, the Alistair Crowley
Yeah, I remember.
website. Um, and we talk a lot then. Uh, but then at that time, his life was pretty. I mean, it's pretty busy now, but it was more so as well then. Uh, and then probably more closely since about 2013.
Yeah, he's a busy guy, but he kind of makes time for his people too. I enjoy some really wonderful conversations with Kyle about magic and just life in general. He's a great guy. Um,
Yes,
he's got his new book coming out here. Beyond the Golden Omen is Kyle Feight's new book, and I've got it coming in the mail. I'm really, really excited. Um, and so I've heard that some of it was kind of compiled from some of the Tanzentorums or maybe other journals that he's written for. Is that true?
Yes, that's right. Tantorum, Zars and Sounds. Um, and as I say, also some of a lot of the conversations we've had together, we've sort of bounced a lot of ideas off of each other over the years. Um, so you sort of see bits and pieces, as I say, weave themselves into both of our works.
I was gonna say there was a chapter in Keys to the Hoodoo Kingdom where I was pretty sure it was a dialogue between you and him. Is that true?
I'm gonna say nothing.
Okay, okay, all right, all right.
Let me know which one you think it is, and I'll let you know.
Okay, all right. Yeah, we don't have to go there. I was just curious. But that's interesting. I mean, you guys, I mean, it's just so interesting. I'm so obsessed with the OTOA LCN because it's like the people. First of all, Michael Bertriaux was an extremely original occultist, and you're an artist as well and an occultist, and Kyle Fight is a very different artist and a very different occultist, and you guys are working within the same kind of material, but you have your own complete like different mythos and your own complete like originality. Like, and it seems like a lot of the people who are associated with the OTOA LCN are like that. Like it almost seems like an order that encourages creativity, like a massive sort of almost acrobatic intellect, you know, and I just find that interesting. Working within the same current, but developing two completely different mythos that are just, you know, they have similarities, but they're utterly different and original.
I think it's partly a byproduct of the work, because one of the things I was aware of very early on with it was that you know I I didn't want to regurgitate anything Michael had done or other people really,
Yeah.
um, but at the same time I wanted to give people a flavor of the experiences I'd undergone as a result of it, because as I say I had from an early age. I had quite an in-depth knowledge of Crowley and Thelema and the Golden Dawn and sort of everything related with that and witchcraft as well, English witchcraft and traditional witchcraft. Um, and none of them really had the same visceral impact that some of the very simple stuff in the Lucky Hoodoo Grimoire had, you know. Um, and I found personally that it kind of unlocked a lot of creativity as well. It was almost like, the spirits were feeding on the creativity, and the more you produced, the more they wanted. And so we were talking earlier about, ways of powering systems, and art and creativity is another way of powering magical systems. You
Yeah.
know, they can feed off of that sort of devotion. Um, and so yeah, it's kind of a byproduct of things. And also, OTOA LCN is a specialist order. It's not really a teaching order, although the Monastery of the Seven Rays acts in that manner. The orders themselves are not teaching orders, and so the initiates, particularly the Grandmasters like myself and some of my colleagues, and Kyle, the Sovereign Grandmaster, um, have a lot of sort of individual and self-sustaining uh, abilities and skills that they bring to it. It's not sort of a beginners group. It's not it's
Oh
not a
yeah.
it's not a social media group. It's not. We get many inquiries about membership and about joining because people have either read in the workbook or seen other things. And many of them we have to point blank refuse and turn away because they're certainly not ready for the level of activity and commitment that is required. Although that's not to say that people aren't admitted, because they are, and that there aren't ways into it, because there are the monastery papers. There are the books Kyle and myself have written, etc., to help people with that. But at its heart, it remains a specialist group of magicians. Effectively, it's and that's not to portray it in any kind of sort of elitist way or
No,
anything.
no, it's just
Um,
you're working with like a very, very sort of I don't know what the word is. It's a whole new horizon of intellectualism and very, very difficult magic, it would seem like.
yeah, it can be. As I say, I mean, it is eased by the fact that inside of the orders looking out, because you've got that relationship with the Germain family, and you've got these particular orders of Gede that sort of align to the order as well, it becomes a lot easier. It's not quite, and things become a little bit more joined up from the inside looking out. And that's why, really, with Keys to the Hoodoo Kingdom, there's a whole section in the middle called Apprentice and Master,
Mhm.
where I took questions over about a year period that people had asked me, who were interested in the current, etc., and really try to use that book as a gateway in for people who would find the workbook itself hard going in the first instance, or weren't quite sure where to enter into things from.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you. So you were saying, obviously you came across Gnostic Voudon workbook when you were much younger, but you really started to get into it around 2012 when Weiser had republished it. Where did you get into the Monastery of the Seven Rays after that, or was it like before, or like what like yeah, I've heard it read that you're sort of supposed to go through the 4-year course of the Seven Rays first and then get into the Gnostic Voodoo workbook, but I have an idea that not everybody does it that way.
No, no, and again, it's one of these things that's sort of been complicated by events over time. So, um, the 4-year papers of the monastery are structured as an introduction to things. So they start off from very simple questions about, what is occultism and the like, and then they move on in an ordered progression to the more difficult stuff. And but that is a separate body of work, that was initially a correspondence course and then became the sort of, let's say, the cornerstone of the orders in terms of teaching students. That's the material they would work with. Um, but then with the publication of the workbook, it meant you'd got some more advanced stuff there as well, because there are LCM papers, there are Corons on Club papers, etc. in there that are a lot more advanced, and some of them were meant for members only.
Mhm.
So it is, again, it's harder to approach things with the workbook on its own. Uh, and the advantage people have now, of course, is that the monastery papers have been published as 4 volumes as well in Italy. They're in English, but so they are readily available now, because previously they were just pirated on the internet.
Yeah.
Uh, and many of them were incomplete as well. I mean, the 4th year ones were missing a chunk of material.
I've heard
Uh,
that there's like a like kind of a Nordic association with the 4th year one. Is that true?
there's a slight one. I mean, there are some passing references to the Nordic pantheon and the Voodoo one, but there's not a great deal.
Interesting.
There's nothing for example, there's nothing about runes.
You do it how you do it. I mean, I obviously I'm reading the Gnostic Voudon workbook first, and I've gone through and I've read some stuff from the Monastery of the Seven Rays that like friends of mine have and stuff like that, and I've read some of the very early introductory stuff like in the first year, and I aspire to read all those books. Like I don't know, it just the OTOA LCN is such an elusive and interesting order. It's like you want to aspire to join. It's like there's something that calls to you. Like it's like It's like this is like the really really good stuff. It's like it seems like it's like sitting on this high plateau, like this mountain, and I don't know. I'm very fascinated with it.
Yeah, I mean, you can understand why Kenneth Grant held it in such esteem. Um, and the other thing is with the material that really you could go down so many rabbit holes that just one thing on its own can be, a lifetime of study and practice.
Exactly.
I mean, I tell people the Lucky Hoodoo Grimoire seems simple, but everything is contained in it. It actually unfolds into everything else. And so if you just worked with that on its own, you would find that all these other things sort of interconnect and arise. Um, and I think that's one of the beauties of it. I always remember, again, going back to that younger me. I spent a summer once working odd jobs to save up enough money to buy Rigardi's Golden Dawn, the big blue one.
The yellow pages.
Yeah, the prior to that, the blue brick. There's a big blue version of it. Um, and when I got it and read it, all the rituals and stuff, I was so disappointed because already by then I'd realized that you could boil things down. You
Yeah,
a bit like Spare with his sigils of, turning sentences into symbols. You could do it with ritual and you could do it with practice. And so, I very quickly kind of pared the Golden Dawn rituals down into their key constituent components and worked them astrally in that way. And I found with Lucky Hoodoo years later that it was very similar in that way. That when with the Golden Dawn stuff, when you actually melted it all down, you came to something that was very similar to Lucky Hoodoo. And actually, when you looked at the Enochian side of it, a lot of the Enochian stuff is very similar to the Hoodoo spirits themselves.
interesting. Uh, how so exactly? Like, well,
I think in terms of
like elementally speaking, or like,
elementally, also in their nature, especially on the gay day side of things and the do side of the hoodoo, there's a lot of kind of, mischievousness going on um, that you have to bear in mind. And, there were a lot of aspects of that with the Enochian entities,
that's
as
true.
he found out.
Yeah, actually, me and my wife enjoy doing ritual work sometimes, and we did an Enochian conjuration one day of a spirit associated with the northern quarter, the Earth tablet, and it later that night, my wife had heard a hissing in the hallway, and my daughter heard it as well, and my wife was like, "We're not doing any more of this Enochian stuff in the house."
Yeah, I had a very similar experience. We had one on the stairs, and it would just bang up and down the stairs until I dealt with it.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I was so obsessed with the material, and for some reason had it in my head that this was light work, and there's prayer involved, and John Dee in his own way seemed like this person who was just so I don't know, he seemed like a light worker. He seemed like somebody who really had a belief in God sort of. But when you go through the actual accounts of people who have worked with it, for instance, Jack Parsons, like reading the Babylon working is very much an Enochian ritual. I don't know if a lot of people realize that, but he was working with like Exarpe, and he was working with elemental spirits from the air tablet. And he talks about poltergeist activity in the house
Yeah.
constantly. Like, so I didn't really realize this until I started getting into it, and then I was like, yeah, these are some pretty mischievous spirits.
Yeah, and I think one of the other difficulties as well is that certainly the earlier published stuff on Enochian, there is stuff missing and there is stuff mistranscribed, which doesn't help.
Yeah.
And there's also stuff actually in the very nature. of the tablets that kind of they can start to spell out stuff their own way, if that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Again, going to the mischievous stuff, there is this sentience to them, and it's something that I picked. One of the things with the going back to my Leng mythos and the cubes, the cubes are very much like that as well. They're a little like the tablets, in their nature. And in fact, actually, now I think about it, I'm reminded. I wrote a story called "A Christmas in Brompton," which was a result of in the British Museum. They have Dee's scrying glass, the globe, and his black shoestone.
Yeah, they have all of his ritual equipment.
Display in the British Museum, and I've been to visit them many times.
Was it powerful just being around them?
It is, yeah. And one time, I was there standing, sort of looking in the crystal ball, and thinking, yeah, some of those are still in there, aren't they?
Yeah,
they've been sitting there centuries, and it prompted me to write this piece. But yeah, it is powerful stuff. But like you say, that often with a lot of poltergeist activity associated with it, which I can say.
We'll have to get together again and just talk about Enochian for like 2 hours. I would love that. I love Enochian.
We can do that. The puddles of stone form a clock face over the bones at our below. I net the cyst with my gaze over the snake-shed mound. Gib Hill stands proud still. The farm burns, it seems, in the hollow. The snow is wandering, leaning against its walls and beams. The laymen stand upon the tumuli, sucking the sky through the stones, as bronze-flecked power intones itself. The blood of murderers has soaked this place, when the silver iris had sat high, past judgment, stoked the coals of the sky. Upon the starlight track, from low to tall, with emerald standards they've passed, the last of the war-weary priests have fallen here. Iris wanders now amidst the limestone wells, their anger bottled within her, the air filled with her spells and curses. The lone towering wind scratches the earth, her hound returns. The clouds are ruffled, baneful bronze shadows flicker behind me. Over the bones at our below, eternity slows to a pebble dropping.